Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Good evening from Middlesbrough, where the smell of its remaining chemical industry is in the air. We've parked our Referendum road trip truck in front of the town hall in the heart of the town. And in a moment, I'll be asking an audience of local people and politicians what they want to hear from Labour in particular on Europe. All this week, the Newsnight truck is travelling north to south, from Glasgow to Middlesbrough to Leicester, Chipping Norton, and finally on Friday to Bognor Regis to find out what people really think about the EU. Last night we were in Glasgow, and today the Newsnight crew took the roadshow truck across the beautiful Pennines and into the industrial town of Middlesbrough, past a piece of classic engineering, the famous transporter bridge at the port. Here, there's a proud industrial heritage in steel and chemicals, where people still call themselves the smoggies, but times have been tough. Industry is in decline, unemployment is well above the national average, and this is amongst the most deprived boroughs in England. But there's pride in this town, and they're proud too of their famous sons. From the explorer and navigator Captain Cook to the football visionary Brian Clough, twice winner of, what else, but the European Cup. And they're celebrating present-day footballing glory too. They've just been promoted back to the Premier League. So, in this one-time industrial heartland, has the EU been a power for good or simply exacerbated its decline? Well, first tonight we have a small audience here of voters from Middlesbrough, including some first-time voters with a wide variety of views. Now let's just hear from Ray Kelly first of all. Now, you're voting for Leave. Why?
Well, just to get back our democracy, get back our government and get back our border controls.
So you feel that what you want most of all is to stop immigration?
Well, yes, not to stop, but to control it. And we appreciate we have to have immigration, but we need to control it. And we can't control it at this moment in time.
Now, from your point of view, you are going to vote to remain or leave. You see, I think that you're a Leave man.
I'm a Leave man myself as well. Mainly on the basis that I'm a guy of older values. In regards to when the EU was first made, it was all about working together and trying to build a better world, better Europe, better market. Those values, I feel, are long gone now, and we have to try and re-cement the values.
So where do you think they've gone wrong in values? Because isn't the idea of the accession countries bringing other countries into the fold very much one of a bigger European family?
Yeah, you can bring in all the countries you want. I mean, we're wanting to bring a lot more, like Algeria and places like that, bring the countries in. However, I mean, I'm all for immigration. And they bring so much value to the UK economy, a lot more than I feel that. Yeah, a different Leave view. I feel there's a lot more. Myself, I feel that we should look at UK citizens and how they contribute to the EU in general, and look away from the immigration.
Now, Terry, you've got another view. You want to remain, and you've got a particular concern.
So my concern is mainly the NHS. I feel like if we do leave, that there'll be huge detrimental effects to the NHS.
And yet what people say is if we do leave, there'll be more money to spend on the NHS.
It's what they say. However, they do say that all that money will be put straight into the NHS, where there's a lot of other places that expenditure needs to go to. So whether there's truth in that, who knows? But I think it's a big gamble to take.
Well, we're also very, very close here to MIMA, which is the art gallery here, and Alistair Hudson. Tell me, what does the EU do for you and your gallery?
Well, we get direct EU funding, and not only the funding, but we have collaborations with museums and universities and cultural organisations all over Europe.
But don't you have that with America and Canada and Australia?
We do, but these are our neighbours. They're right next to us. We're in it with them. And the only way to work is through collaboration in the future. Isolationism is just something of an era past.
But in a town which is as hard-pressed as Middlesbrough, Is this the best use of EU money, do you think?
Yeah, because it goes into skills, it goes into training, it goes into education, it goes into a whole host of things that support the culture and the economy of the region.
Right, now I'd like to speak to Oliver Robinson. Here you are a first-time voter.
Yes.
Nervous about it?
A little bit, yeah. You know, it's just a question of like, where do you go with this with a first-time kind of deal?
So you haven't decided what you're going to do?
I haven't, no.
And what will persuade you one way or the other?
I think a lot of it's going to be a lot of business, and obviously we are like the future of the country and everything else, and that makes us, I feel, the most important. I think we haven't really been targeted enough in terms of political campaigns.
Right. Oh, and what about you? Where do you stand?
Well, I mean, I'm undecided, but I think it would be like a lot easier for us first-time voters, like if the government really want us to have like an unbiased vote, like that we've decided ourselves. I think that like the pros and cons of leaving or remaining need to be a lot simpler.
Right, so let's just very say that you've only got 10 days left and you don't think the politicians are giving you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you'll get some answers tonight because we'll be
so.
speaking to politicians later on. But actually, Labour grandees have been out in force now trying to push the case for Remain. But a lot of people actually don't know where Labour stands on this referendum. And Katie Razzle has been out and about trying to find out about the disconnect between the Labour elite and the Labour voters.
A ghostly presence in this region. The now defunct Redcar Steelworks loom out of the fog. They closed for good 8 months ago. More than 3,000 workers and suppliers lost their jobs. 175 years of steelmaking consigned to history.
Okay, so what we've been doing in the theory side of the lesson is going through the different...
At Middlesborough College's STEM training centre, amongst the apprentices, a pot of £1.2 million has been allocated specifically to retrain people who lost their jobs in steel.
Yep, correct indication.
With opportunities for overtime, wages in the steel industry were high.
In the situation we'd have.
This former electrical supervisor at Redcar has taken a pay cut to become a trainer at the college, though he's very grateful to have a job. What happened at Redcar has influenced his decision in the referendum.
Oh, I'm going to vote out, definitely. They could have saved it.
But you got the message that they said they couldn't because of the EU rules?
Yes, because of EU was stopping them from saving it, basically.
You'll see the exploding ball. That is flammable.
In another classroom, a one-day course on health and safety. 5 here lost their jobs when the steelworks shut. In the past, they'd have been Labour through and through, and might have listened to what the party is saying about remaining in the EU. Not anymore.
I was just after a show of hands. How many of you are thinking of voting in? How many of you are thinking of voting out?
I think it's disgraceful. You know, we're just systematically losing industries throughout the country. Steel industry, shipbuilding industry, the fisheries, everything just seems to be going.
And is that not globalisation?
No, I don't think it is globalisation, because we're under restraints from the EU.
If traditional Labour voters are key to Britain continuing EU membership, Labour needs to work a lot harder to persuade them. Middlesbrough has been Labour for decades, but the party's message doesn't appear to be reaching working-class voters.
So this is going to be a dry bar, and that means a bar, an adult-type environment, but there's no booze.
Andy Preston's a local philanthropist. When open, this site will offer work and opportunities to recovering addicts. He left the Labour Party a few years ago, but is campaigning to stay in the EU and has picked up a disconnect between Labour and its core voters.
The biggest single thing that people are talking about is immigration. And what's clear is that they don't understand why they can't talk about it with their politicians and why their politicians aren't talking about it. What's gone on is that people have seen their area change physically. It looks different, it feels different, and they've got discomfort with that. Labour's unwillingness and discomfort about talking about the concept of immigration is really impacting this whole referendum.
Well, on the 23rd of June, I'm voting out, and the reason being is, apart from the massive immigration, I mean, we should now be taking totally control of our own borders.
Caring for her grandchildren takes up Jane Thistlethwaite's every waking moment. She's a kinship carer. The children's parents are addicts, and the kids would be in care without Jane and her husband.
You cut down on your bills, your electric, your gas, you don't use them as much. You're frightened to use too much, you know, and you've just got to be careful with your money. It's just the love you've got for them, and they need love and care anyway.
When you're struggling, the sense that others are getting a better deal can easily take hold.
There's no houses for any, you know, like for other, like our own people. I know I shouldn't say that, but it's our own, and they're bringing all this immigration in. The jobs are gone. Nobody can get any money or anything like that. You know, the allowance that they're entitled to, they're cutting that back as well. So they've got more money for the other people, which is the immigrants.
When you speak to people around here about the Labour Party and how Labour wants them to vote in, are they listening, do you think?
No, not at all. They're not listening at all. They want to be out. Labour's doing nothing at all for them whatsoever. They've decided that they want to vote out and stay out. Labour was for working class, but there's no jobs no more. There's just no working class for them, so they prefer to vote out.
Just how widespread is the desire amongst voters to leave the EU in a region that's benefited from European money but suffers economically?
As you know, this is taken from the same designs as original Boosbeck.
In the 1930s, Boosbeck was a scheme that had unemployed miners making furniture. Artist Adam Clark has reinvented it with help from Middlesborough's Institute of Modern Art and some EU funding. The idea is to reskill and give employment to people in the area. All here are left-leaning and support Britain's EU membership.
I'm very firmly a Remain voter. I don't think that leaving the EU will do workers any favours. I think we need to be represented at a European level as well.
It's when people are poor, it's very easy to point the finger, isn't it? It's totally, I wouldn't say justifiable, but I would say understandable reaction. Things have got harder again recently, so with the cuts.
Do they have an answer to Labour's travails?
I think there's almost a politics of personality that's required. Personally, I think Jeremy Corbyn's doing a good job, but I think traditional voters need somebody who's, you know, in the vein of Nigel Farage, but with different political views, of course, who can persuade them to come back to Labour.
I think what we've had historically is that hard-working people in the past relied on the Labour Party to look after their interests with workers' rights, with pay and with international issues. Now people are sensing that the Labour Party and other parties aren't looking after them in the same way. And what we're seeing here is not necessarily a desertion of the Labour Party, but a bit of rebellion by the core support. I predict that to continue as people nationally move away from party politics. But that's the challenge Labour's got, is to re-engage with these people and say we're relevant now.
The question for both sides in this referendum: can Labour do that in the next 9 days?
Katie Razzle, well, with me now is a Shadow Civil Society Minister and Labour MP for Redcar, Anna Turley. And those sentiments there from Katie Razzle's film, I know that you think there's a terrible sense of urgency and you're actually quite critical of the Labour leadership.
Well, it's about critical of the campaign so far. We've really got to get out and talk to people. Today was very mixed for me on the doorstep, but the issue is there's real palpable anger on Teesside. We've been devastated in the last 6 months with the loss of the steelworks. That's 3,000 jobs that went overnight, not just steelworkers, but everyone is affected, from childminders to window cleaners. And the problem is at the moment, people are angry and they're hitting out. We can't afford for people to cut off the nose and spite the face and hit out with the EU, because it was not the EU that was responsible. It was failure of the government to intervene and support us.
But again, this idea that actually there have been huge benefits from the EU in this area in terms of money put in, but people don't see it. People don't see it in their everyday lives.
No, we are a net beneficiary of what comes out of the EU, but the issue is we've got to tell people that we've got fantastic assets here on Teesside, from our port, our chemical industry. They rely on having a market in Europe. If we don't invest, we're going to make the situation worse, and the industrial sabotage that we saw last year is going to be industrial self-harm if we vote to go out.
But is that Labour message getting through? Because I know that you think that London appears to be a very, very long way away.
It does. London has felt a really long way away, particularly throughout this whole process. We didn't feel people understood the steel crisis. We still don't think they understand Teesside. We've had the Heseltine report, which said all the jobs have been absorbed, which they haven't. London isn't understanding us, and we need the leadership. I was very, very delighted to see Jeremy come out today with the whole Labour movement and to say, this is about workers' rights.
But this is interesting because, of course, people are now saying, and Katie Razzle found that actually there are a lot of people that don't actually know where Labour stands.
No, and we found that on the doorstep. A lot of Labour supporters who are undecided, voting either way, and they want to hear what we've got to say. They want to know how it affects their lives, how it affects their pay, their conditions, particularly women. And so we've got a big job to do in the next 10 days.
And what we heard from that film is that one of Labour's big failures is prepared to talk about the immigration word.
Yep, I think that's right. We haven't been prepared to talk about issues like immigration. There are issues like security and crime, antisocial behaviour. These are things we've got to grasp and listen. These are what people are telling us on the doorstep. And if we stick our head in the sand, then we're not in touch with people. Again, Tom Watson came out today and I think made a really important statement. We've got to look at the free movement because people here have seen their wages depressed. But that's not because of Europe. Again, there is a lot of global immigration as well.
You're going to be staying here and we're going to be talking a little bit more about what you can and cannot do on free movement. But right now we're going to cross over to get the latest from our political editor, Nick Watt, who joins us from London. I gather, as Anna's saying, Labour leaders and big figures have been out in force today, yeah?
Thanks, Kirsty. Yes, they have indeed been out in force, and they share the concerns that you're hearing there from Anna. And what we're hearing tonight is those fears have become so great that there are senior Labour figures in the Remain campaign who are saying to their Conservative colleagues, the Prime Minister has got to talk about immigration. This is the issue that is in danger of meaning that Labour voters are deserting the Remain campaign. We understand that it's a very difficult issue for the Prime Minister to talk about. Doesn't want to talk about his net migration target. But Yvette Cooper, the former Shadow Home Secretary, is saying tonight, and has been telling her Tory colleagues, the Prime Minister should say, for example, he could use the UK presidency of the EU next year to talk about possible modest reforms to freedom of movement. But the message from Number 10 tonight is no, we want to focus this campaign on the economy, and they are so wary of talking about immigration, they won't even talk about one of the things that Gordon Brown and Yvette Cooper have been talking about that was in the Conservative manifesto, and that is establishing a special fund to help areas that are struggling under the impact of immigrants.
So it's got a sense of disarray with 9 days to go, but tomorrow is now going to be one of the more eventful days in the campaign.
Yes, what we will see tomorrow is George Osborne living up to that Number 10 commitment, which is to try and yank this campaign back to the economy. He will share a platform with his predecessor as Chancellor, Alistair Darling, and they will say that IFS estimates suggest there will be a £30 billion black hole in the public finances if we voted to leave. And the way you deal with that, they're talking about an emergency Brexit budget, which would have £15 billion of tax increases, £15 billion of spending cuts. Now, why are they doing this? Well, they want to reprise the success that they believe they had in signalling the economic risks in that Scottish independence referendum. And there was, interestingly, turmoil on the markets today, a flight to safety as the FTSE 100 index went below 6,000 for the first time since February. And the second thing they want to do is they want to say that Vote Leave's idea of spending an extra 100 million a week on the NHS is a con, because there would be a big hit to the economy. But Vote Leave are saying that's nonsense, it's scaremongering, and they say they will outline a positive vision tomorrow of how they could take the UK out of the EU in a step-by-step process by 2019.
Nick, thank you very much. And we're going to be back in Middlesbrough for more conversation before the end of the programme. We are joined again by the Shadow Civil Society Minister and Labour MP Anna Turley. And also joining us is Frank Harrison, a former steelworker who supports UKIP and in fact in 1975 voted out to be out of the EU. First of all, Anna, not only is there a divide between Remain and Labour and Remain and Tory about whether to talk about immigration, there now appears to be a divide within Labour about whether or not free movement is sacrosanct or not. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I think it's really important that Tom brought this to the surface today, because I think it absolutely goes to the heart of the issues that we're talking about. In this area, I've spoken to many people who have been affected by immigration in terms of wages being pushed down. We have to talk about it, we have to be realistic, and we have to have solutions.
There's absolutely nothing you can do on free movement itself within the countries that exist within the European Union at the moment. It's all very well talking about new countries. You can't do anything.
But you can make these decisions when you're at the table, when you're leading in Europe. You can have these discussions. And even in our last manifesto last year, we wanted to stop companies coming here and undercutting British wages from overseas. There are lots of things you can do to tackle the pressures, as Hilary said, and the impact on local communities that immigration has. But we've got to have a thoughtful process to deliver this. And we've got to have a look at real practical solutions, not just bury our heads in the sand.
Frank, you worked in the steel industry all your life, and now you're having to, by dint of the fact that the steel industry is disappearing, take other jobs, but you actually are speaking to workers who've got their own concerns.
I'm speaking to a lot of union men, actually, from different walks of life. Only the other day, I had a chap come to my house. He was worried there'd been a shutdown on ICI Wilton.
Which, of course, is ICI Chemicals,
Chemicals, just across from where I live. And he was unable to get a job, and he was a welder, a good, skilled man. And when I got the details from another union chap, there was actually 70% foreign labour on that site.
Now, what others would say to you is that your welder friend and others could actually go and work on mainland Europe.
Well, I don't think a lot of them have, a lot of them have been there before. The chap I've just spoke to, he was actually working in Holland for a time. But like everywhere else, you get a bit homesick, so you come back. But when you come back, you expect to find work in your own area. Yeah, with the loss of steel, the chemical industry's been decimated through Europe, so there's getting less and less work.
So is your allegiance to UKIP to do with the economy or to do with the issue of immigration?
None really. It started when Tony Blair went into power. That was when the Labour Party didn't exist anymore.
Right. So you were a Labour man up to then?
I was, yes. Yeah.
Anna, you're not going to fix this in 9 days. This is actually becoming a big divide. And it seems extraordinary to me that political leaders are now changing the script so close to a referendum vote. It sounds as if people are just being expedient in order to try and chase that vote without actually any ability to deliver change.
No, it's just really important that we talk about the number one issue on the doorstep, and that's what's at the root of this. And it's no good saying we're talking about immigration, we're listening, but we don't have any solutions. We've got to start looking at what the options are and exploring.
You spoke to Hilary Benn today. You heard him there. He's absolutely directly at odds with Tom Watson's view.
Well, we've got to have this discussion, but there's a whole range of views within the Labour Party, there's a whole range of views within the Conservative Party, there's a whole range of views out there on the doorstep. My priority is whether it's for Wilton, for the chemicals, with the ports, we've got to be in Europe to get those companies to come and invest in here, and we can talk about the practicalities and how we can protect those jobs for local people once we're at the table in Europe.
Do you both think it's on a knife edge?
Yes.
You think it's a knife edge, and you think it's a knife edge too? Well, thank you both very much for joining us tonight, and indeed to the audience who is still here beside the town hall, beside our truck. That's all we've got time for tonight. The truck moves south to Leicester tomorrow, and Evan will be taking the wheel. Good night.